you so much, Adams House community, for me. I was extremely delighted when Sean and Judy asked if I could present today. And so I have a short presentation. The way it's going to go is I have these pictures and recordings that I've collected over the last 2 years while being a student attorney at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau. It's a student-run nonprofit at the Harvard Law School, and I primarily do work in eviction defense, working with folks in the Boston area who can't afford their own lawyers and helping them defend against evictions. And I'm going to be going through these pictures, going through I'm going to be sharing audio as well, and some video, and I'm going to do my best to just kind of talk about what that was like, and how I've grown from the experience. And then I hope to have some time at the end for some question and answer. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get my screen ready for recording and sharing. So, title of this talk is Reflections of a Harvard Law Student Attorney, Triumphs, Trials, and Tribulations. And yes, Judy, I'm going to do my best to focus on the triumphs. I want us to walk away here feeling very triumphant, but I do want to also share some of the realities that are going on in Boston related to housing. So first, let's go ahead and present. All right, so who's that fellow right there? That's me, Dennis Ojo. This picture was taken on my very first day as a student attorney. We had just gotten our certification from the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. So as a second or third year law student in Massachusetts, you can represent individuals in Boston in trial courts, appeals courts, etc., as long as you are supervised by an actual attorney. And so the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau is a student-run organization that has 8 clinical professors who all are real lawyers, and they have real cases in housing, employment, etc., family law, and I work mainly in the housing practice, and I do all matters related to litigation in these housing cases. And my professor makes sure that she just signs off on everything and makes sure that I'm not committing malpractice, but otherwise I am really practicing as a student lawyer. And this picture means a lot to me. This is taken right there in sunnier days at the campus of Harvard Law School, and we just got back from visiting the housing court for the first time. And this was, we had an opportunity to meet the chief judge of the housing court at that time, and I still remember. So this was an unfortunate thing that happened, but the housing court judge sat there, and we were all sitting there, a large group of Black students, and she told us that she really admired us for working with folks who representing people who at best had a 50-50 shot at winning a case in her housing court. That was very, very hard to hear, and it really set the stage for what I would see, and it really motivated me to make sure that when we went to court that we would always have more than what she expected of us there. And that's why I want to start with the triumphs, because our clients are amazing people, and unfortunately the system can be stacked against them, and it can make a lot of assumptions about people because of the color of their skin, their income level. But there are a lot of great people out there who are doing work to make sure that there's justice seen in our housing court. And so for triumphs. So these are my very first clients ever. Ruby James Saucer and Michelle Ewing. This is a screenshot of an article posted by the City Life Vida Urbana community organization. And I'm going to share some more. I'm going to share a video that's going to share a little bit more about their story. But these are 2 grandmothers who were living on fixed incomes, and their landlord tried to raise their rent, significantly without meeting their obligations as a landlord, and proceeded to initiate what is called a no-fault eviction against them. So in Massachusetts, a lot of people don't realize that you can be evicted for no fault. Even if you're paying the rent you agreed to pay, you haven't violated your lease in any way, you can still be evicted. And that's what these grandmothers were facing. And so I'm going to now close that out and play the first video that will give you a little bit about their story, and yeah, so we'll start here, and please let me know if you can't hear it well.
We begin tonight with two grandmothers facing displacement from their apartments in Mattapan. Housing advocates from City Life Vida Urbana showed support last night for Ruby James Saucer and Michelle Ewing. They say they face a rent increase of $700 a month for their apartments in a house on Rexford Street, a few blocks from a new stop on the Fairmount Indigo commuter rail line.
I thought that was very ridiculous to ask someone for $700 increase on a rent when you didn't do anything in the apartment. When I move into the apartment, it's the same, and you want $700 and didn't do anything. So I said, no, I'm not giving him $700. My blood pressure went up. My diabetes got out of control. I have a granddaughter and a great-granddaughter. And where am I going? I live on a fixed income, and I cannot afford $700.
They just want you out. So it's insulting for them to think that you're stupid enough to believe that if you give them the increase, that they're going to fix your apartment. Because if they were, they would have bought it, they would have sat down with you, they would have talked about what they were going to do, and they would have done it.
Once again, we have greed taking over in America. We have greed that doesn't care about anybody's personal situations, and all they want is money, and they don't care about anything else.
It's happening all over the city of Boston, in every single neighborhood. Thousands of people faced with displacement or threatened with displacement. And all of this for building clear-outs and rent increases that are completely unnecessary for the landlord. They just want to make as much as they possibly can. So we're saying always people before profit, that this gargantuan real estate profit does not take precedence over people's lives and people's homes.
Okay, so that was a little bit about Ruby James Saucer and Michelle Ewing, and they were my first clients. And so this young man here had to go and negotiate with lawyers who had been practicing for as long as I had been alive at that time, and it was nerve-wracking. It was very scary to walk into that court and to be faced with speaking in front of a judge. I remember how difficult it was for me to even negotiate what questions we were asking the landlord to, and what questions they had to answer and what documents they had to provide us. That was the first task that I had to do for Miss Saucer and Miss Ewing, and I was terrified. But the model that we had was that you're going to learn on the job, and you are going to realize that you're capable of far more than you possibly realize you are. And over time, I was able to build confidence. This is the section called Triumphs, because we were able to succeed. We were able to, through organizing such as this, and through good lawyering, good supervision from the lawyers I was working with.
Yeah, I'm off camera.
And we were able to get them brand new leases that only had a rent increase that matched inflation essentially, and that was able to keep them secure, and they were no longer had to worry about facing eviction. And that was just such a huge victory for them, for both of them. And so what I want to do now is share a little bit. This is a feature. So I was featured on the Harvard Law website for the work that I was doing, and this is a audio clip where we were at the one of the victory meetings. So I talked a little bit about what the program's about, and then you will also hear a little bit about me talking to some of the City Life members. So hi everybody, my name is Dennis Rojo. I'm a law student, and I just gotta say that Michelle Ewing is my first client, along with Ruby James Foster, and it's incredible to have clients like these, like all of you who come to City Life. You make the job of a student attorney very easy because you're all incredible advocates, and we just have to follow. This was a case that, going in, we knew that we were going to win because when we fight, we win. And just like Michelle was saying, the other side, they were, getting so emotional. They think they're cool. Jeremy and I, we just did what we could at the negotiating table.
You had a lot of class, and your mother should be proud.
City Life Vida Urbana is a tenants organization that has existed in Boston since the 1970s. So for nearly 50 years, this organization, which is located in Jamaica Plain and East Boston, has been a place where tenants in Boston who are facing evictions can come together, build power together, share strategies and stories about what's happening to them in terms of their housing. Work with organizers and attorneys, student attorneys like myself, as well as actual licensed attorneys in order to help them fight their eviction cases. What ends up happening often is that they'll receive a letter in their mailbox saying that you must vacate. This is a notice to quit. You have 30 days to leave. And that is very scary. If you're not a lawyer, even if you are a lawyer but you don't know anything about housing law, you might think that that means that you have to leave and you don't have any rights. I have a lot of privilege to be a Harvard Law student and to have the training and the access to the resources that I have in the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau to help make a difference in the community that I live in today. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I was born in Los Angeles, and California is currently facing a housing crisis. And so what really drew me to doing housing work here in Boston was knowing many people in my family, my friends, my neighbors, seeing the difficulties that come when your housing isn't stable. And so, as somebody who believes in social justice, I feel that if your home is not stable, then it's very hard for the other things that we believe everyone should have: right to an adequate and robust education, a right to health care, and to employment. Those things are very difficult to have if you don't have a home. And so what we're doing here is we're trying to get that in order, get that stable, so that people here in Boston who come to City Life can live flourishing lives. And so, yes, we won. Ms. Saucer and Ms. Ewing were very happy with the results, and they are now living in the places where they've been living for many, many years with fair leases and no longer facing the threat of eviction. And I just wanted to play one more clip. This is of Ms. Ruby James Saucer talking, and
To pay $700.
you can also see me here. This was so we first did a Miss Ewing's case. Now this is Miss Saucer, and she was talking about what happened and how she's now happy with the result.
Thanks City Life Vida Urbana for supporting me in my struggle for the last year and a half. As I told you, my landlord wanted me to pay a $700 increase on the $1,500 I was already paying. And I said...
Uh-oh. Okay, 1 second. Hold on. I think maybe I have to refresh. Try this again.
Thanks City Life Vida Urbana for support. Could not afford $700 on top of $1,500. Right. So I came to City Life, got the lawyers, and I want to give much appreciation to Dennis, Jeremy, and Eloise. They did all the work.
appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I really do.
Yeah, so those are my first cases, and I was from there. You can imagine, the confidence that gave me. This was in my first few months of practice, practicing as a student, and we were able to make an impact in at least 2 lives. That I can say for sure, and it's something that has been driving me over and over. And so that's triumphs. Now, trials. So. As a first year student, I had a very rare opportunity to participate in a jury trial. So for anyone who knows anything about our legal system, you'll know that jury trials are extremely rare, not only in the civil, but also in the criminal as well. And so we were able to, this case that I was on, that came through the City Life Vida Urbana, tenant organization. We were dealing with an egregious landlord, somebody who really did not have any care at all for their tenants, who decided to, buy this building that you see. It's this blue building that is behind the organizers here. It's a 6-unit building, bought it, and decided to just send everyone mass notices to quit, eviction notices. The building is in massive disrepair, and his only interest was in flipping it and making a big profit. And meanwhile, you have elderly folks, all Black people, many immigrants who, did not have a lot of basic utilities working, did not have a lot of, basic things for, sanitary, that met the sanitary code. And so this was a big impact case that we took on, and we were fighting it for many, many months. Before I got on the case, many students before me were able to get the cases that this landlord had thrown out based on technicalities, based on procedural errors. For example, you can't just put a notice somewhere plastered in the front without it actually going directly to the person and being addressed to them. That just kind of shows the disregard that this landlord had for these individuals, for my clients. But by the time that I got on the case, we were going to trial. He was very intent on going to trial, even though it was not really a good case for him, because it was a no-fault eviction. All we had to do was show that our clients were entitled to at least $1 in damages, which maybe even just from looking at this picture, you can tell that there are at least $1 damages. But we had a jury, and it was an extremely grueling process. But yes, as with just 2 months into this program, I was up there in front of a judge, doing a direct examination of an exterminator and an inspector who went and saw the conditions of the apartment. I asked all these questions. I did a cross-examination, did all of this, and it was a grueling 2-week process. And here's a picture of the team. So the folks that are in yellow are some of the organizers. You see me and some of my clients to my left, and then some of the other legal teams, some other students, and our supervisor. And so, it was a real team effort. Those of you in Adam's house, if you've been here for a couple of years, you probably remember me. For a time, I was always in the dining hall in a suit. It was like this period of time. I was always carrying my briefcase. I was always in a suit, and I was always going to downtown Boston to court. And yeah, it was an incredible experience for me to have 12 citizens of Boston deciding the fate of of our clients and deciding just deciding, whether they're going to be able to stay in their home or not. This is as high stakes as things get in the civil law context. And so it was stressful, but I also really, really enjoyed the process. And this is another triumph because we won that case. And it was a really beautiful moment. The jury was on our side. And they got to stay in their homes, and they won significant damages. It was a total of $60,000 damages, $30,000 for the two gentlemen that you see there in between us. And so that was an incredible moment to just experience that victory. It was something that gave me a lot of confidence, again, to be able to do a jury trial, something that many lawyers don't get to do until they're much more senior and have a lot more experience. But the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau gave me that experience. Okay, so tribulations. I want to continue talking about this case because so that happened in October of 2019. We won the case, and the landlord had to pay our clients substantial damages. He was ordered by the court to pay the substantial damages and to repair all of the horrible conditions that were in the apartments. But this is the kind of the sobering part of everything, and I'm still in the middle of this, but I wanted to walk through a letter that we recently sent to the director of the Boston Public Development Agency and other local leaders, because almost 2 years later, this landlord has been dragging their feet in making the repairs. Has not paid paid us our attorney's fees, has not even paid his own attorney, and has allowed a lot of major conditions to remain on the property. And so we're still in the middle of, trying to get repairs done. The court is kind of like holding the landlord's hand along the way in a way. It just goes to show that there are limits to the law, and unfortunately our clients have to suffer a lot. But the good news is that we secured 5-year leases for them, all at the rent that they were paying. So they have, a very, very solid claims. They have very solid leases going forward, but unfortunately the current landlord, he's still trying to sell the apartment. And that's why he's not trying to make any efforts to repair things now. But we feel like it's just going to be a long time. We're going to have to just keep on fighting to make sure that things get repaired. But there's still a lot of renovations that need to be done in the apartment. And this is just, this was just something that I've learned now. Like, even when you win, the law is still something that works kind of slowly, and it's, you can't give up. You can't give up. You have to keep on fighting. And our clients, they're incredible people. They have suffered such indignities with so much dignity. And I know that in the end, I'm going to hand off this case over to the next generation of students, and it's like a baton. They're going to take it on, and they're going to make sure that the repairs get made, and that eventually, what was promised, which is a 5-year lease in a brand new renovated apartment, is going to be what they're going to have. And so this is a to be continued on this one. We're going to court every couple of weeks, seeing when is this next thing going to get repaired, when is that going to get repaired. But we're not giving up yet. So that's why I call it tribulations, because we're still fighting on this one. And yeah, just want to make sure people can take a look at that. And yeah, so I'm coming to the last part of my presentation now, which is looking ahead. And just last semester, I had the opportunity to do something also very cool. So this is, what you're witnessing is a screenshot of an oral argument that I presented at the Massachusetts Appeals Court. Completely different case, and I don't have enough time. If we had more time, I would show like the full video. It's about 30 minutes of me arguing against Attorney Turk down there, who about someone who we feel they evicted improperly. But just to say a little bit about this was also a very rare opportunity that I had, which was to argue a case in front of the Massachusetts Appeals Court and to potentially create law if we win the case. So this is another to be continued because the decision has not come down yet. I promise that I will send you all the video. I'll put it in the chat once I stop sharing my screen. But just a short synopsis about the case. There's a young man who lives with his mother, who has significant mental and emotional disabilities. And there was an altercation that happened with an exterminator who came in. They live in public housing. And the landlord decided to, try to evict him because of this altercation that happened. But they tried to evict him within a civil case that had nothing to do with that incident. It was a case that actually started about emails that he was sending to the landlord and their property manager. Allegedly harassing emails. And within that case, they tried to evict him, and the judge actually granted that eviction. But we very quickly jumped on there and were able to get him to stay on that. So he's still in his apartment, and we argued that that eviction violated a number of laws and equity principles in Massachusetts. And so those judges, as you can see, that in the top row, they were listening intently as I was making that my case. And we will find out what happens. We're really hoping that the case gets sent back down and that it gets properly litigated because we feel that they did not properly consider his disabilities in evicting him there. So stay tuned. I will be sure to share with the rest of the Adams community about how that case ends up going. But yeah, that's it. So I'm going to stop there and allow it for us to answer any questions for the remaining time we have. Thank you.
Can I ask, what was the, I'm sure there were some city or state laws that applied here that gave the tenants protections that you were enforcing in the lawsuit. Could you just give us a brief overview of what those were? Because if you look at it just from a pure commercial point of view, once the lease, the contract is over, there's no obligation, unless there's a renewal clause on the landlord to renew it. There is an obligation on the tenants to pay rent, and then the lease also presumably has in it what condition what repairs have to be made. So I'm assuming if they're in an eviction situation, there must be some tenant protections that are as a matter of law that you were supporting.
Yes, that's a great question. So a lot of what we were doing and the way that, the laws that we were helping to enforce were laws that were created by the legislature back in the 1970s when there was a massive shift in how we think about tenant rights and how we think about landlord-tenant relationships. So before that, it very much was this idea that it was just, property, that it was just the landlord's property. And once once the lease is over, it really goes back all the way to how we thought about it, going back to feudal times. This is the landlord's property and you are the tenant, you are here, when you think about maybe in a more rural context that you are here just to, work this land or what have you. And that kind of survived in our law, even to tenants' rights, to tenants, even in an urban context up to the 1960s. Then in the 1970s, there was a massive change where we thought about it more as a contract where the landlord has a lot of responsibilities when it comes to making sure that it's habitable, making sure that they, safeguard your security deposit. And so a lot of our practice was enforcing a law called 8A, which pretty much means that a landlord has to keep the building and the apartment up to the sanitary code and other state regulations before you can initiate and win and get possession back of the apartment. And so a lot of times there's a lot of landlords who will, try to start a no-fault eviction. Either they want to increase the rent and there's no agreement on the rent, or they want to flip the house, flip the apartment. And the way the legislature has made it is that tenants, the way we enforce the sanitary code here in Massachusetts is to make sure that no one can be evicted without things being up to code. And so it's kind of like this self-regulating, self-enforcing mechanism, because otherwise, landlords wouldn't really have an incentive to fix things up if they're trying to, renovate it and sell it for a higher price.
Dennis, I would say for everybody, I've been a pediatrician in Massachusetts for 45 years, and based at Boston Medical Center, and I would say probably 30% of my patients have had issues like this. During that time, I also ran the Boston Lead Poisoning Prevention Program, and the battles that 100% of those patients whose children had elevated leads were involved in battles with their landlords and required the support of the inspectional services for the city of Boston and from lawyers like yourself. And so I just want to underscore for the audience here the magnitude of the challenge and the problem, because this is going on in a huge percentage of inner city Boston families' lives, and it jeopardizes them in all sorts of ways. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Looks like Eddie wants to turn on your...
Yeah, Dennis, that was fantastic. I wanted to make 2 points. One is the tradition of black students going to law school at Adams House. When I first got to Adams House, I think in 1977, there was a black student, Luther Regan, who helped set us up with the Worker Student Alliance. He was the first one to do that, and he applied to Harvard Law School. Even though he got in academically, he was sent a letter saying that because of your associations, your acceptance to Harvard Law School is denied. There was a big campaign on campus, and he finally got into law school, and now the last time I checked him out, he was in the Bronx, New York, doing some legal aid, but also that, like what Paul just raised, we work with City Life also in my union, and we figure that in my union, which is the Hotel Western workers and dining hall workers, minimum of 1,000 of our members, once their unemployment runs out, will be facing eviction. And so we're working with City Life also and probably they're setting you up ready to deal with the 1,000 of our members minimum that will be under eviction. Just right now, we're also working with City Life because they also have a medical team led by Noel there, who we're working with to try to get those not only tenants who are in trouble, but also our members to want to take the vaccine. So we're working with them right now, but getting ready for 1,000 of our members who will be evicted. So thank you, Dennis, for this tremendous work.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Amber, her hand up.
Hey, Dennis, thank you so much. I just was wondering about whether you could tell us about any of the challenges around COVID that have really presented themselves. I know that evictions were kind of staved off in a lot of places, but I'm wondering if those are being lifted, and if there are just any, that's kind of the obvious thing, but are there other things that you're encountering and speaking to people about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when COVID happened, there was a massive influx of cases for non-payment of rent that came in that you can imagine. And on our end, we were really worried. We were anticipating there to be a massive eviction crisis, more than it was, and a massive, just like being starved for resources. We didn't think that we could really handle what was going to happen. But thankfully, the advocacy work of organizations like City Life and some of the work that we've done at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau was able to make it so that we've been able to delay at least the avalanche of cases in advocating for an eviction moratorium, first of all. So back in, I believe it was April or so, the governor of Massachusetts signed a moratorium on all evictions that did not threaten the health or safety of anyone. And so this meant, no fault cases, non-payment cases, or any like very minor lease violations. And so, the courts were actually pretty light on cases going until October. And then the federal government also passed a moratorium as well through the CDC. And so that made it so that moratorium is actually still in place. And so if you have an eviction, if you have not been able to pay rent, like if you're the reason why you'd be evicted is because you can't pay rent. The federal, and it's related to COVID, which is just about everyone. Then you still can't be evicted for that. That was extended by Biden, I believe, into to March at least. So that's the reason why we haven't seen a massive eviction crisis yet. But that doesn't mean that there haven't been challenges. A lot of the clients that we're dealing with are still challenged with having lost their jobs and being really, really behind in rent. And the Massachusetts had this rent assistance program. At first, you could apply for $4,000. They increased it to $10,000, and that there was just a huge fiasco in just trying to get that money to people. It still is really hard for people to get that money. But right now, people are not really been forced out of their homes just yet. One thing that we were able to do is that we've been able to have people that had evictions that were kind of lined up, eviction cases lined up. If you apply for if you as a tenant ask for a jury trial, that really extends the timeline of your case. And because of how many eviction cases there are, any new cases that were initiated in Boston last year, really there was a certain point where they're for sure not going to happen until 2022 at the earliest. Like there's that much backup. So I suppose that is the good news, is that we haven't really felt overwhelmed just yet, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. There's a lot of cases, and I fear that unless there is a massive rent assistance program, there's someone is going to have to take the hit from the economic hit of this, and I'm afraid that a lot of tenants are going to be forced out of their homes when really there should be more to be done to just recognize that this is an unprecedented crisis, and no one should have to lose their home because they lost their job because of COVID. And so yeah, that's kind of the state of things now. I'll say one more thing is that we did see some landlords try to be really creative in a bad way through the moratorium. So for example, the case that I just linked, and I highly encourage everyone to look at that argument. the reason why they tried to evict him within that civil case is because they couldn't go into the courts because of the moratorium. And so there's, new problems that are now created, and people trying to skirt around the law because of that moratorium. But yeah, that's kind of the state of things now. Tucker.
Hey, Dennis. Thank you for that presentation. That was awesome. My question is kind of a bigger picture question. You were talking about passing the baton off eventually to the sort of incoming law students and who will take over those cases. What do you see for yourself? Sort of like, what sorts of cases do you see yourself taking on as you get into sort of your professional life after you graduate, and sort of like what's the dream that you want to do? Do you want to continue to do this sort of thing, or is there another specific area? Would you stay around here? Just like generally, what are you thinking?
Thank you, Tucker, and shout out to Tucker, who was in my entryway last year. For me, I am very much, I know that I'm really interested in economic justice broadly, and using the law to help make it so that we don't have statistics such as Boston having, black people in Boston having $8 in wealth versus white people in Boston having over $200,000. That I feel like when you have statistics such as that, and that's the reality, it's very hard for there to be actual equal opportunity. And so I really appreciated my time in doing this housing work, this eviction defense work. And I really loved working directly with clients, and I would love to do that again. But I feel like I found what I want to focus on next through the appeal case that I did, which is I'm interested in doing more impact kind of cases, doing appeals, taking on appeals that I feel, if we can win those cases, we can have a broader impact on the law. And I think that I'm interested in doing that in housing or broader civil rights work in general. And I also have a dream. You asked me what my dream is. My real dream is to be a part-time writer as well. I have a really strong interest in creative writing. And so if you all Google my name and go to my Medium page, you can see some of the stuff that I've written. And I hope to be able to tell stories as well. Not only through, the law, but also just from my own imagination. And so my dream would be to have my own practice where I'm taking on appeals that can have an impact on people, and then also, publish a book or two. I see Sean's hand up.
Okay. I don't want to take anybody else's time, but there's the economic cascade that I often worry about, because not only are the tenants poor, but the landlords are often poor. And so if you evict the people in your house, then you don't get any income. And so the question comes, as the state is looking at how do you provide money to support everybody, where do you think the balance is there? Do you have to support the landlords as well, or what's that balance?
It's a great question, Sean. There is very much a big difference between a landlord who, this is their primary. They have one building. One building. They live in that. In Boston, there's a lot of townhouses where you have one person and then like two other units.
Right.
So I'll say that, all the cases that we don't take on any cases against those kinds of landlords. We very much take on cases where it's larger complexes where we feel like there is a real motivation that is that it really is going to like the balance of things. Is a lot more in favor of preserving this tenancy rather than not. And so you asked about the balance. I think that the state does have a very important role to play in making sure that small landlords are not going to be the ones who front all of this economic impact. And I think that the rent assistance program is designed in that way to make sure that both sides are both small landlords and the tenants are able to make it through this tough time. So the way the program works is that if you are being evicted, you can apply as a tenant for up to $10,000 in rent assistance, and that money goes directly to the landlord. And if they accept the $10,000, then they have to agree to preserve the tenancy and pretty much dismiss the case. And so most landlords have an interest in taking on this rent assistance from the government. Unfortunately, there are some landlords who they see larger dollar signs in their eyes, and they are refusing this guaranteed $10,000. And so those are the kind of landlords that we feel have to be more realistic about, the kind of losses that are going to need to be fronted and need to be absorbed here. We feel like the smaller landlords are going to be more willing to take on that rent assistance so that they can get the income that they're needing and the tenants don't have to be on the street. I see Osiris' hand.
I got two. One of the things, and apologies about, I had to go in and out with the parenting thing, but one of the things that I honed in on was you're talking about the limits of the law. And when I meet with, when I talk to people and I advise them, and they're like, oh, I'm going to apply for graduate school interviews, what should I ask the students? Or I'm going to apply for law school, what should I ask people? Ask them what they thought they were going to do versus what they ended up doing. And so what's one of the kind of really unanticipated lessons or directions in that way that stands out that you might want to emphasize? Thank you.
Yeah, great question for the students out there who are thinking about law. I think I learned this very early, not just from practicing, but even from my studies and just reading cases and learning what the law is. I feel like a lot of us come into law school with this idea of being at the forefront of change, and seeing it as, if I just stand up there and make the best argument possible, and if I write the best brief, I am going to be able to, make bring the new change, bring the next change that was just like the, Brown versus Board of Education, which is, kind of the I think the emblematic case of change. But for anyone who's really studied Brown versus Board, for example, it really wasn't until 10 years later with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that you really had the cementing of desegregation, at least the de jure, the formal segregation in the South. There was a lot of resistance to Brown versus Board of Education, and judges had very little power when officials decided to say, we're not going to follow that decision. And so I think that has become more and more concrete to me in the law, is that I see it as still being valuable, but instead of being on the front end of the change, I see lawyers as being on the back end. And there really has to be a lot of work done by people like the city life organizers, who are directly putting pressure on lawmakers and on the people who have the power of the purse and the sword, as it said, the political branches. I feel like that's where the change really does happen, is in politics, and that's why it is so important to vote and be involved. And I see the law as really about trying to make sure that those changes then, that once you affect public opinion, once you change the laws and you get political leaders on your side, then you can go to the courts and make sure that those laws get written down and they don't get and you like start a new culture, and you help to create a new culture, and you help to cement those changes that really were hard fought in the streets and in legislatures. So that, I think, is the biggest lesson. I think that if you're okay with that, if you're okay with things kind of changing slowly, and you being on the back end of the change, then I think being a lawyer is still a great profession.
We've got so many students here. Are there any questions for Dennis from students?
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about how the clinic works, and also just why not every Harvard Law student is clamoring to be part of it. It looks like a small group of you there.
Yeah, great question. So the way clinics work at Harvard is that, law school is 3 years, and during your first year, you're just taking very heavy classes. You're really steeped in, what is a contract, what is a crime, what is a tort or a civil wrong, and you really don't have much time to be doing kind of this clinical work. Once you get to your second year, you can apply to be in these programs, and there's so many of them at Harvard and at so many law schools where you are working with, you get credit for working on a case that is actually, it belongs to an actual lawyer who is barred and everything. So there is a lawyer on the case, but as a student, you get direct supervision, and you are able to, let's say, write the first draft of something and work with them to, produce this motion or this brief. Your work is being done, and you can interact with the clients and do all of the work that the lawyer would be doing, but you're getting supervision so that nothing that you turn in hasn't been seen and approved by a professor. And all the clinics have clinical professors who they teach, but they primarily are there to supervise cases and teach through action and teach through their cases. That's pretty much what I'm doing there. The Harvard Legal Aid Bureau is unique because it is one of the 3 honor societies at Harvard. You have to apply to be in, and there's about 50 of us. The other 2 honor societies are the Law Review, which Barack Obama is famous for being the first Black president of, and the Bureau of Study Council, which is like student advisors. But I think, why doesn't everybody do, because there are also other clinics. There's like an immigration clinic that you can do family law, you can do, children's welfare. You can do there's so many different programs, but I think different students have different focuses. Some really they're more interested in, let's say, being academics, being professors, so they're not that interested in litigation. There are a lot of law students who end up becoming deal makers and corporate lawyers, and they're not ever going to be in a courtroom ever. Not everybody is getting this experience, but I would say that every student should at least get 1 semester. And I will say that my program is unique in that it's a 2-year commitment. So once you sign up, you're going to do it till you graduate. And that is also, some students don't want to do this work that long. Yeah. All right, Sam.
Thanks for the awesome talk, Dennis. I'm curious to learn more about your interest and your passion in creative writing, because something I'm thinking about a lot is, after graduating in grad school, how much time do you really have to pursue side passions or projects? And so I'd love to hear how you've been able to balance that, and any, tips you might have for pursuing something outside of just your grad degree.
Great. I love this question. Thank you, Azmira. Yeah, you can see some of my writing there on my website. But so my honest feeling is that I did most of my writing during the time that I took between graduating from Harvard College and going to Harvard Law School. And this is one of the main reasons why, if you are one of my pre-law advisees, I'm going to advise you to take at least a year to do something before going to law school. It was really beneficial for me to defer admission for 2 years and to just go and do something else. During those 2 years, I was working as an organizer. I went back home to LA, and I worked with high school students to fight for changes in education policy and especially school discipline, making sure that less students are being pushed through the school to prison pipeline. But I did a lot of my writing then. I had just more time, I felt, during that time. Even the organizing was a big job. I mean, it was still a little bit more predictable hours. And I did a lot of writing then. I also started playing guitar during that time. So a lot of me was developed during that time. And I think that is what's helped me stay very happy during law school, is that I still have things, I have these interests, I have these other passion projects that I cultivated, and that I try to make at least, time 20, 30 minutes a day. So that's my last bit of advice, is that grad school is very busy, you're going to be busy, but as long as you try to dedicate 20 minutes a day to it, that is how I've learned how to play guitar, for example.
Well, Dennis, you are always inspiring, and this was really wonderful. I'm so glad we had so many students here, and please, you know where to find Dennis. I know there's lots more wisdom to get from him, and thanks to everyone. We're thrilled to bring the students together with the Senior Common Room. These are two wonderful groups of people, and we're happy to have you all meeting each other and joining in. So please follow along with the plan for this spring. Mm-hmm. Matt and I have worked very hard on it, and there are some blockbuster, and Dennis leading off, and last week Gloria, blockbuster talks that are coming along that you are not going to want to miss. E.J. Dion is going to be with us. You're not going to want to miss Matt Curiel with his musical performance of Foster Love, about foster children. Just keep coming, and we'll keep feeding you. So we love having this great group of people, and have a wonderful, wonderful night.
Just quickly, I was a lawyer for 37 years, a corporate lawyer. I'd be happy to talk to anyone who'd like to have any questions about practicing law, particularly Dennis, if you have a question about it and how you factor in pro bono work when you're doing that. So you can reach me either directly or through Sean and Judy or Matt. I'm happy to talk to anybody who would like to do that offline.
Bob, do you want to put your email into the chat? Yeah.
Sure, can I do that? Yeah, I'll try to do that. I'm not very technological, but I'll try to do that.
I think you can do it.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Take care, and thank you for all the good work you're doing.